Alrighty, so I'm going to be going ahead and putting in the lifters, push rods, rocker arms, and setting all the valve adjustments on them. So going through that in this video. Pretty easy to set the valves. Just takes a little bit of time. Conveniently, it's a lot easier when you have A, the engine out of the car, B, no spark plugs, and C, a crank turner. So it's going to be a lot easier for me versus in a car, but I've definitely done it in a car, and it takes a bit more time, but it's not too bad anyways. So gonna go through that, grab my lifters and go. Got my lifters sitting over here on my makeshift table, sitting in an oil bath. They've been there for a couple hours now. According to comp cams, it's not really necessary to it's not necessary to pump them up, but oil bath is recommended. So I'll go ahead and show putting one in. Of course, I have the break-in lube on the camshaft itself, but you want to make sure that it's going to spin freely within the lifter bore there. So that one does. I'm going to go through the rest of them and just make sure they all spin like that and put them all in. I've gotten all my lifters in here and they all spin free. Made sure of that. So next step, I guess I should also mention, on the lifters, you need to clean them right out of the box. They put a grease on it that is not like oil, that's the anti-rust grease, so I took them to the parts washer and cleaned them. The next thing is the push rods, and same thing with push rods, I cleaned those up. I got lucky, and when I measured these, it was the same measurement on the intake and exhaust, so I bought a set of 16, and these are the overstocked by 150 rods. One thing I'm going to do that I shouldn't be putting the push rods in already, just a little dab of assembly lube on the caps of each of the lifters, well basically on the ball end of each of the rods, and then I'll also put a dab on the top end and a dab on each of the valve heads. So I'm going to go ahead and do that quick before I start or keep putting in all these rods. Okay, so I've gotten all my push rods installed, got my assembly lubricant on the ball ends of the push rods and on the valve stem tips. So I'm ready to put my rocker arms in and put my rocker arms in and then start adjusting the valves. Alright, so I got my hardware for my rocker arms here. I'm just going to note that these surfaces here, and now these are all used for me from a different vehicle, but these surfaces do see a lot of wear, and so I'm going to be putting some assembly lube on all of these also, on just this this polished part here, because that's going to just ride in that rocker arm right there. So just helps with initial break-in, it's a little bit dry maybe, just that it has some lube there. Granted, I am going to prime the oil system too, so I probably could get away with not doing it, but just to be on the safe side, I'm going to anyways. so I've got this all somewhat assembled. All the stuff is put on here loose. It's not even finger tight, just started a couple threads basically. So yeah, everything's going together pretty well. Basically what I'm going to do, I'm going to grab these are all lock nuts on here. Yeah, this is the stock version of these nuts, so it's just a regular lock nut, not a poly lock or anything like that. But it works without too many issues until you get up to, you know, above 6,000 RPM, and this engine probably won't see that, so it's fine. So basically what I'm going to do is grab an impact and zip these down, and definitely not too tight. I'm just going to run it down just so I don't have to wrench it all the way down. So when I'm actually setting these, the points that you know when is the right point that I do is when the opposite valve is at maximum lift. So right now I'm going to do cylinder number 1 exhaust, which is this one, when this lifter is at maximum lift. So right now it is. There's a little dwell point. So as I crank this over, it goes down. So that's past it. As I crank it back, and you can see it go down. So right about there, that's when you're at the dwell point, or the highest point of the cam lobe. And when this is at its maximum lift, this lifter is for sure, for positive, on the base circle. Now you don't want to set these when they're not on the base circle, or that's when you get like that's how you mess up your valve adjustments. But when this one is at the maximum lift, I can adjust the opposite valve. And then I know for a fact that it's on the base circle right there. So make sure it's on the base circle, and then I can just go around. So I'm going to do this one, then I'm going to crank it over and wait till one of these fires, and then I'll do these two, and I'm just going to go all the way around, and so I don't get lost. Now if you're doing this on a car, I only like to turn it over once because it's a lot more difficult to turn over the engine. If you're watching closely, you can turn the engine over 2 times in total and watch every single lifter be lifted, I guess. Watch every single valve be opened. And if you're, like I said, if you're watching closely, you only have to turn the engine over twice. If you miss it, you probably got another 2 turns to go before you get back to the C cylinder, which isn't the end of the world, but I try to just do it in 2 turns and just watch closely to see when they're firing. But yeah, so this one's at maximum lift. I'm going to tighten this one down until it's tight or in contact. I can feel it when I'm turning this, and then at that point I'm going to add a half turn. This is a 2-handed job, and I'm not very good at doing 2 hands while holding a camera, so I'll do my best. But anyways, basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the push rod in my hand, and I can do it up here. You see all that play in there. So you tighten it down by hand until it's pretty close, and then what I like to do is turn it here. And you can definitely feel the difference of when everything is in contact. So when everything touches, it just gets tight. Like it spins loose and free right now with all this play. As soon as it touches, it gets tough. And at that point, that's when I go ahead and add my lash, which is just a half turn. So 20 thousandths of an inch is basically just a half turn. So I just set my ratchet, you know, let's say I just 1 point and add a half turn, and that's all it would be. Okay, now I'm getting really close. Going really slow. Right there. So now I've reached my contact point. I'll add my half turn, and it's set. That's it. So like I said, got to the point where it was in contact, added a half turn, and that's it. Now one thing I should also mention is that as you're tightening, don't press down with your ratchet on that washer there. Otherwise, if you do that, you're going to give yourself an inaccurate reading. So there's a lot of play right here, but if I push down on this, all of a sudden there's no play, it feels like. But that's not right, because basically it's just a gap. in between the washer and the nut. So hold your ratchet up off the washer so you don't give yourself an inaccurate reading. But that's it. And so now I get to do the other 14 valves. All right, got all of my valves adjusted. So yeah, basically, I guess don't get hung up on the half a turn. Basically, that's about 20 thousandths. Preload is half a turn. So a lot of people say half a turn to 3/4 of a turn is fine. And in reality, these lifters are rated for 20 thousandths to 60 thousandths of preload. So anywhere between a half turn and 1.5 turns, but everybody always says half to 3/4 is better. And that's what I would recommend. Is I do half. Make sure at least I get half, maybe a little bit more if I need to. But yeah, basically it's this is all assembled, and I think it's always fun to watch. See if I can get one coming up, so you can see how that lifter is pushed down there. It's down way under that spring. And then you come back down, and it comes back up. So yeah, the spring in the lifter is, when that valve is coming up, when the cam lobe is pushing the lifter up, it's compressing that spring a little bit, and that little shot of oil there actually helps to get the oil up to the top too. So that helps oil your valve train. Is it necessary? No, because these lifters are sitting in a bore that's pressurized, so the oil could still get up even without that. But it does help it get up there. And yeah, I always find it interesting. That's why these are hydraulic, because they can compress versus and move around a little bit. There's a little bit of give to them versus a solid lifter, which would not have any give right there. So these valves need to be adjusted perfectly. And actually there's a little bit of a gap on a solid lifter versus a hydraulic. And with a solid lifter, like I said, it has to be adjusted perfectly, and there's some shims and everything that you need to use. And that's, that's valve by valve. It could be slightly different. So, I mean, if you look at a cylinder head, the valves might be at a slightly different level. And that's why you need to measure your push rods, at different spots. And that's also why you, on a solid lifter cam, will have to measure each and every valve to make them set. So, yeah, that's it for the setting the hydraulic lifters. Basically, I'd call this almost assembled here. I have an intake I'm going to throw on now, and then I'm waiting on my valve cover gaskets. But besides that, it's getting pretty close to assembled here, so making good progress.